Hi, thanks for tuning in to another dose of bite-sized bits of knowledge where we give you meaningful information in a short amount of time. We're almost done with the transfers segment, and we're still on involuntary transfers, and we're breaking it down. Today, we're going to talk about termination of employment, okay, or termination of membership interests. In the former case, sometimes it's very common to give key employees or key contractors, or key advisors, some shares of the company. Whether, we talked about it in another video, the different kinds of ways of doing it. You can give them voting, non-voting, you can give them profits, interest, shares. There's a lot of ways to do it. But suffice to say, there needs to be documentation that when they are no longer employed, that they have to sell their shares back. Because for the same reasons of disability and death, you don't want to have a former employee still owning shares. This is not a publicly traded company with a big market for, selling and transferring shares. You want to keep it in-house, you want to keep it small. And I don't think you want to reward a former employee any more than we're contemplating here today. So when an employee, contractor, advisor, etc. departs, usually that's tied to a trigger that says you have to sell back your shares to the company, and we'll talk about the mechanics of that in another video. Let's talk about, usually an employee, contractor, advisor has a contract, okay? If this is done correctly, you should have your governing documents and you should have your employment agreements, used loosely, separate because they're different. And regardless, you should have provisions in them that say that upon termination, you're subject to the transfer rules in the governing document. Now, those transfer rules should be for an employee, contractor, or advisor. They should have something called, loosely speaking, good notice, bad notice. Good notice, bad notice. Good notice means, okay, you give us ample notice as defined in the agreement. That way we can find someone to replace you and we can train them and we can kind of minimize the disruption to the business by your departure. Obviously, you're an important person to the company if you have shares, so it's going to take time to replace you. So giving good notice is what we're contracting to do in the document so that it minimizes disruption. And if you do good notice, then the terms of the sale will be more favorable to you as the departing employee, contractor, or advisor. On the other hand, if you give bad notice, which is basically this, violating your notice provision, not giving enough notice, screwing the company, leaving them, shorthanded to have to figure out hiring and training, then that's going to be a less favorable transaction to sell the shares back. I mean, you're entitled to, in my view of the world, this person who's departing is entitled to the fair value of their shares. I'm just talking about the terms of how they get it and whether or not they get it more favorably or less favorably based on how much notice they give you. It's important because you'll see when we talk about the mechanics of how the sale works, it's another way that bad notice could really burden the business. And so it's very common, and good agreements are contemplating these kinds of ideas. Okay. The next video we're going to talk about is going to be on some complications with transfers and the mechanics of transfers. So I'm really excited to get into that one. Don't forget to download our business planning stress test if you have not done so already. It's free, as well as our Florida formation checklist and some other goodies that you'll find linked below. Thank you for stopping by and stay tuned for more.